Welcome back to another episode of Global Card Collectors. Today we have on Joey from LA. He is on Instagram at Sac Kings Cards. There are periods between the Sac and Kings and between Kings and Cards. Um, and as you can probably guess, he's a Sacramento Kings collector. And anyone familiar with the show or has listened to me talk before knows that I am as well. Joey recently inspired us and started a Kings collector group on IG. So it was great to find him there, and so excited to welcome him now to Global Card Collectors. How you doing today, Joey?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to talk cards. Thanks for having me on. Always kind of excited to talk cards, especially if it's with another Kings fan and collector.
Yeah, so I mean the most shocking thing for me when I when we first started chatting was you're in LA, you're from LA, and you're a Kings collector. How does this happen?
It probably isn't coincidental because my first memories of rooting for the Kings came in the late 90s and early 2000s, which I guess is understandable because that was the greatest years of the Sacramento Kings. But ultimately, it came from the fact that being in LA, my parents were avid Laker haters. Like, I know that it's LA and I guess more Orange County, but I was the one person I knew around me growing up that came from a family that hated the Lakers. And so because the Lakers and Kings met in the playoffs several times in that period, I found myself consistently rooting for the Kings, and that's because they were up against the Lakers. Now, it obviously helped the fact that they were an exciting team and they had a really fun style of play. So I think that probably hooked me in a little bit. I thought their players were likable and stuff like that. But ultimately, that's where it came from. I was just rooting for them every year because I wanted them to beat the Lakers, and it just stuck. And it's been 27 years or so of mostly struggling to find things to root for, but I've stuck with it.
Yeah, I like to think we have stronger characters as a result of rooting for the Kings and just going through such suffering.
And if we ever win an NBA Finals, it's going to be the sweetest thing ever. So,
Yeah, I mean, it would be insane. Yeah, I just got goosebumps actually saying that, thinking about it. Yeah, I mean that, and of course, 2002, Western Conference Finals. That can really, I mean, I'll never. I mean, it's really weird for me now because I love Luca, so I'm
hmm.
transitioning to kind of I'm actually rooting for the Lakers because
Oh,
I'm
that's
rooting for
interesting.
him. It's weird. But are there others of your kind, let's say, in LA who are Laker haters?
I've read about, I think mostly on Reddit, I've read about Kings fans that are living in Southern California. But yeah, I mean, around me, I can't think of really anyone that I've come across that in my normal interactions, whether that be at work or in school growing up or whatever, that didn't really like the Lakers. I remember in the early 2010s when the Lakers were going up against the Durant and Westbrook Thunder, and I think it might have been like 2012, maybe 2011, when the Thunder took them to a pretty competitive six-game series in the first round. And I remember being at Buffalo Wild Wings, and among all my friends, like I was the one person sitting there rooting for the Thunder, and then everyone else was cheering for the Lakers. So
Yeah. I mean, do you think there's something? I mean, my father always kind of installed in me just, if a random game was on, he would be rooting for the underdog. Do you think that factors in at all?
oh yeah, I always root for the underdog. I can totally relate to that. I feel like my baseball fandom is with the Cleveland Indian Guardians, and I feel like that was born from a similar time in the mid 90s when they were good and going to a lot of championship series and ultimately the World Series where they were always the underdog. So I think it's a lot of that kind of like underdog makes them more likable, makes them easier to root for, and you kind of hope for that kind of Cinderella story to pan out.
And I don't remember that well. Was it the Yankees that probably stood in their way? Or
Yeah, I mean, the Yankees, they ultimately went to the 95 and 97 World Series and lost to the Braves and the Marlins, respectively. So, you know,
yeah, I mean the Braves were kind of evil empire in the late 90s or in the 90s even, I guess you'd say, right?
yeah. But I think through all that, even though they went to the NLCS, gosh, 5 times or something, like they only won one World Series, I think. I don't quote me on that, but it's kind of crazy how, dominant they were with and only coming out of it with one title.
That yeah, I mean that, and that's so satisfying. I mean, for me, I'm a San Francisco Giants baseball fan. I'm not as passionate as I am about the NBA, but watching the Dodgers like only get one title in the last 8 years. How do you feel about the Dodgers? Are you
Oh, I mean, like that's a whole huge can of worms, but I just hate what they've done to baseball pretty much. I mean, like again, as a Guardians fan, like in the championship series last season, 3 out of the 4 teams were top three in payroll. The Mets, the Dodgers, and the Yankees, and then there were the Guardians, the lowly Guardians, in the bottom third of the league in payroll. And so it just kind of and on top of that, after the Dodgers dominated and won the World Series, they added a couple dominant pitchers, a free agent from Japan that's going to be a flagship starter, a couple big bats and relievers. It's like how much, like at some point, there's got to be some parity it's just not good for the game. And I think we're seeing it in basketball now, where you see in the past several years the Bucks have won, you see like the Nuggets have won. So these smaller market teams, it's just in my mind, when any team has a chance to win, it just makes the game more enjoyable, and I feel like it makes your fans more engaged. So yeah, I'm always rooting against the Dodgers, maybe because of the underdog thing, but I also kind of just feel like they've broken baseball.
Yeah, I kind of don't care about baseball anymore. I mean, maybe that has a element to it. I think that is kind of a reason. It's like start the season and you're not going to win the division, and so what's the point? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, it's tough when you're in the division with the Dodgers. You know that you're hoping for a wild card berth.
basically, yeah.
Yeah. But the Giants had that good run, right? They won like every other year for a few years there.
Amazing. Yeah, I have I'm a Niners fan, a Giants fan, and I have nothing to complain about. That those Giants teams in the 2010s were, they totally overachieved. They didn't talent-wise deserve to win 3 championships, which
Sure.
made it all the more fun, of course. And yeah, maybe in 10 years they'll be good again. Maybe the Dodgers will. Who knows? Hard to see
Yeah.
given the money in the situation, but. Um, we'll see. Yeah,
Yeah.
no complaints. Um, so you started rooting for the Kings in, I guess, late 90s, early 2000s. And then it's been, yeah, kind of from 05, 06, it got dark as a
Right.
Kings fan. And then, but you told me, we were chatting earlier, that you got into cards in around 2010, right? How did that
Yeah, early
happen?
2010.
Yeah,
I mean, ultimately, I got a job and started making some money, and I was looking for something to do with that money. And at the time, I was really passionate about fantasy basketball, so I had some sort of investment and understanding of players on every team and the stats and all that stuff. And I ultimately kind of just started looking for something related to basketball and fantasy basketball because that was really my main passion at the time. Actually, at the time, I wasn't following baseball at all. I think it was really like the 2016 World Series run that brought me back into baseball, the Indians World Series run. So it was really only basketball at the time. And I came across, I believe it was probably the blowout forums that I came across as I was just doing my internet searching. It might have been Sports Card Forum, but one of those forums, and I started reading and stuff, and I just thought it was cool. I mean, I thought it was cool. A couple things. First of all, just the idea of kind of memorializing my fandom, potentially thinking back and looking at cards from those early 2000s and the greatest show on court teams, I felt like were it was cool. It was nostalgic to be able to relate to that and kind of have a piece of that in my hands. And then what really blew my mind was game used cards, like jersey cards, patch cards, and it kind of still blows my mind that, I could in some cases for $1 pick up a card that contains a piece of a jersey that was worn in an actual MLB or NBA game by a player on my team. And some of the things that blow my mind is, and I kind of go crazy on Tim Duncan stuff because I kind of collect him on the side. I mean, I could pick up a Tim Duncan jersey card for $5, and he's a Hall of Famer, in my opinion, at least one of the 10 greatest basketball players of all time. And I could have a piece of his jersey that he wore in an actual NBA game for $5. And I just think that is crazy. Not to mention the fact that I think that patch cards are beautiful. Um, so ultimately that kind of brought me in. I bought a couple boxes and packs from like retail blaster boxes. I bought a couple hobby boxes. And I think in my first retail blaster box, I pulled a Kevin Durant numbered auto, and he was my favorite player at the time. And then, or sorry, not numbered auto, numbered parallel. And then in my first hobby box, I pulled a Tim Duncan patch card out of 25. So I was like, this is just insane. And then it kind of stuck with me that pulling your own cards for your collection is just a totally different feeling. Unfortunately, not one that I think is really sustainable to feel much anymore, given like the current state of wax prices and stuff. But that's really what got me sucked in. And then I just obviously my natural focus was the Kings because those that was my team that I rooted for.
I mean, I like the how you outlined the value of a patch card. And it's truly a piece of memorabilia, and of course autos go for way more. Um, everyone likes different things, fine. But that is and okay, so patch cards though also have been, very diluted.
Mhm.
Many are not game worn, let alone player worn. And if they're player worn, they're, Dick's Sporting Goods or
Yeah.
whatever, and then they just cut it out. The guy puts it on his back or something. If he even does that, like I've never even seen a photo of people doing that. So,
Right.
um, for the patch market, I mean, but you go back though, I mean, in the 2000s and these 2010s, you can get great stuff.
Mhm.
Right? Is that fair? How would you kind of expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, most of those Duncan cards, for example, that appeal to me are ones from those 2000s eras, so 2000 to 2005 are the ones where it just blows my mind because of what you're mentioning, right? There wasn't quite such a saturated patch and jersey landscape out there. So yeah, that's really what I like. And kind of about your point on those player worn things, there, I don't know, it must have been 10 years ago or so, there was a picture circulating of Mark Ingram. I think he was a running back on the Saints.
Yep.
Um, and how Panini had literally stuffed like 10 or 20 jerseys on him at once just to, be able to use those jerseys and cards. And so it's a funny throwback to that.
I did. I remember now that you mentioned it. I remember seeing that or hearing or learning about that. Um, do you have any like patch cards that you really like or want to show us that kind of speak to it? Or
Yeah, I mean, so one of my favorite sets, actually, probably, I mean, without really putting any time or thought into it, my favorite patch set is from 2015-16 Panini Preferred. And one of the things that appeals to me so much is that it's a game dated set. So all the patches are from specific games that are kind of outlined on the card, and they're all booklets. And so, for example, I have two. I have one. I'll show you the Kings one first because the patch isn't quite as nice. But this is the DeMarcus Cousins one, and it's a acetate patch. It's an acetate surface, really nice patch. Um, and the you see like the great picture or photo of the game action here. It was a jersey worn in that game. It tells you what his statistics were in that game. So, 24 points, 16 rebounds, 2 blocks, the final score, the date. So this is the sort of patch set that I think is just incredible because if I wanted to buy this game worn jersey, it would what cost hundreds of dollars. if not, DeMarcus Cousins isn't maybe the most desirable um, game-worn jersey memorabilia player, but it costs hundreds of dollars for some players, thousands of dollars, and it to me, this is holding a piece of that without at a fraction of the cost. This is a much nicer patch. This is the Russell Westbrook from that set. Try and get it so like the light isn't quite so, but you can see again, like amazing patch and try to turn that down a little. Yeah, amazing patch, great action shot. Like we don't even get shots, action photos like that on cards much anymore. There's hollow foil on it. He again had an incredible game. So it just to me is like to me, this is the epitome of a cohesive, well thought out, beautifully designed set that includes literal pieces of NBA history in it.
Those are amazing. I've never seen them, and I for listeners, I mean the patches are three color at least on both those that you showed, and looks like a number or part of the name.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I'm I'm a little speechless. It's really those are incredible. This
Yeah,
is
I
this
just they blow me away, honestly.
this is doing this podcast is dangerous. I'm gonna go on, definitely going to go on and look around and just look at eBay and see what's out there. Um, Very cool. Yeah, I have one patch card, and it's Madison Bumgarner of the
Uh-huh.
Giants, and it is a 2015. I forget I forget the exact brand, but it's something tops. But again, like three color patch, and it has a I don't know like a logo on it or not a logo, but a anyway you can basically type in the number online on MLB,
Oh yeah.
right? Are you familiar with those?
Yeah, like the holograms. Yeah, I like that
Hologram.
MLB puts that sort of like those holograms on there to kind of tell you where it came from for sure.
So yeah, I mean that was sorry, it's not about me today, but I mean that was 15 after the year we won, in 2014, and he was like just incredible, like probably one of the best ever World Series performances. Pitched three games and he pitched the seventh game, last five innings. It was just anyway. So
No, that's awesome. Again, that's
yeah,
that's what's so cool. It's like you can memorialize that moment in like really one of the greatest playoff or World Series moments, at least in the modern, era of baseball. And it's just you get to have that in your collection. It's crazy.
yeah, no, very cool. So you're into patch cards and that I guess how have you evolved a bit just from 2010, let's say, to now in your collecting habits, let's say, or approaches?
I would say my main evolution is that I've expanded beyond collecting the Kings. Like I alluded to the fact that I collect Duncan, that I started collecting more sets. So like that stat line memorabilia set, I'm actually going for the set. And so I'm trying to put sets together. I'm trying to collect cards of players I like. So that normally falls under I would summarize it as like the humble superstar. So the Duncans, the Dirks, the Giannis, right? Those kinds of guys that just kind of like they're about their business. They're loyal to their team. Most of them, those ones that I collect, are have been with one team their entire career, and obviously they're incredible basketball players. But I think that's the biggest change is I really enjoy cards, and I think that by expanding beyond just collecting kings, I get to experience a lot more. I get to collect a lot more, and my collection has been able to become a little bit more diverse and robust in kind of exploring other avenues a little bit. I try to stay focused on those specific side projects, like specific players and specific sets, but yeah.
Okay, so you try, but sometimes fail, but I guess.
Yeah, sometimes fail. I hope I'm still pretty good about it, but I guess like my one thing that I fail at is I fail at staying focused on like significant cards of those side players. I mean, I hate to say the word significant because I don't really love the association with like cards have to be valuable to be important or significant or well designed or whatever. But Every now and then I'll see a card, a Dirk card that I just don't really need and have never really wanted, but hey, I can combine shipping, so I'll throw it in there. Stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, we all fall prey to that
Yeah.
to some degree. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Cage Lawyer is his Instagram handle. I He was kind of one of the first podcasts, this Lucas Tigers and Bronze, that I was listening to regularly.
Okay.
And he was on some show, I guess, last weekend, and kind of the point was being made that there's just to your significant point about value, and that so much is just so much of why people are in cards, and I think to some extent I am too, is because they're valuable, right? And we think somehow they're going to be more valuable. Of course, we fixate on the value, and so I mean, he was also making the point, like for his channel, he does not do collector content because, frankly, people don't. It's so personalized, number one, and that it's also, just so then it doesn't appeal to as many people. And I think that's true. I mean, you kind of need to focus on the market and these aspects to, have a bigger channel or whatever, more following. So what do you think about that? I mean, you know, I wanted to ask you this because you have recently been, as I alluded to in the intro, been very outgoing about you started this IG Kings group, um, which is great. We've kind of, we're not talking that much because I think we're all kind of just collectors. Whereas I can kind of juxtapose that with a Jokic group that I'm in.
Mhm.
And I don't want to, I'm not trying to disparage them or anything, but they've been on quite a ride. Their cards have, appreciated quite a bit, and he's playing right now, so there's lots of, excitement, like watching the games. There's like a monetary connection, I think, there, and they're buying really big cards too. It's kind of out of my league thing, but um anyway, I said a lot. What any reflections on what I brought up?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, to begin with your first point about kind of what you post or what you engage with, or I guess put out there being a little bit less collector specific because that's so personal. I mean, I think you're right. I think that if I think it ultimately comes down to the goal. I mean, personally speaking, I feel like I've always tried to make sure that my goal was not to amass some sort of like following or brand or anything like that. I mean, and it's kind of always been one of my issues with, like, I guess one of my drawbacks, I think, with Instagram in general as a means or a media for engaging with, cards, is that a little bit of that and a little bit of the Instagram thing, just like in real life, has to do with like appealing to the masses and getting a following and having the likes and the followers and things like that. And I try, like, I don't have a personal Instagram. I just don't care about that stuff. So I kind of, to me, what it is trying to just display like my collecting and trying to trying to essentially expose how much I love cards. That's it. And I've even mentioned that if that just means that I'm doing some sort of kind of analog to a card blog. It's not a blog because it's Instagram, or it's not a blog because it's being on forums. And I've started putting like YouTube videos up out there. So even if it's just a blog or a diary, it could just be something for me. And I'm fine with that if that's what it is. And if it amasses a little more of a following, that's fine too. Ultimately, and the reason I even started doing the YouTube thing is because I just feel like there's not a ton of places where you can have conversations about cards. I mean, you alluded to it, but a lot of it is about market, and a lot of it is about projecting future value or projecting sets or cards that to target so that you can that'll increase in value. And obviously there's nothing wrong with that. We're all spending real money here, and that is important, and we all work hard for that real money. It's just, and there's definitely a place for that. But I also think there's a place for just loving the cards and card designs and loving what you get out of cards and loving the collection of cards that you might put together, even if it's not, even if it doesn't necessarily have the potential to increase in value. And I definitely think you're right. I think that about the activity maybe in the Jokic chat, who's another player, by the way, that I love collecting kind of side cards of. But his stuff I just never pick up now because he's so, he, like you alluded to, he's so in the mainstream focus that his stuff is always more expensive than I feel like is important for me to add to my PC. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the collectors in our Kings chat aren't necessarily collecting the current players on the team. So I think it makes sense that it's maybe not as active. So I do think there's some sort of overlap there. But at the same time, I think that hopefully we can on some level, we are also collecting cards because we love cards, I think. And hopefully that a little more of that can kind of manifest itself through whether that's Instagram or forums or YouTube. Hopefully that can come out. And part of what actually got me deep into the deep dive of YouTube is I found some vintage baseball YouTube channels. And man, those people can go online and talk for 2 hours about the most random stuff. Like I think I listened to a 2 hour video on different Willie Mays cards and a 2 hour video on Venezuelan vintage baseball releases. And I don't collect any vintage baseball, but that stuff is just cool to me because those are people that are nerding out about cards. And I think that um, at least for me, and my primary focus is basketball, even though I do collect baseball too. Basketball could use a little more nerding out, I think. And I don't know if that was too long-winded of an answer, but those are just some thoughts that.
No, that's what I wanted. I think you're right about basketball. I mean, obviously we don't have the lineage of baseball, and the Kings we only have a few decades, and
Yeah.
it's been mostly sad. But
Huh.
yeah. I mean, how do you I'm curious how you approach the current team, and I think we can take it back maybe to I don't know, Fox being drafted, kind of how have you felt about collecting the Kings kind of since then? Because I mean, I'll give Fox credit. I mean, Sabonis was obviously the guy who elevated us to being, potentially in the playoffs. But I think that was a nice start where we started to kind of turn things around, right? I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that when your team is so bad for so long, you find yourself, or at least I found myself over the last couple decades, kind of trying to focus more on rooting for the individual players. I mean, when you're having like 30 win seasons or 28 win seasons, at some point you're not necessarily even wanting your team to win anymore, right? You want to get a better draft pick or whatever. But I could still watch my team and hope that, you know, Ben McLemore is developing and watch for his development or root for Isaiah Thomas, who's the last pick of the draft and turning into what would eventually become an MVP candidate, right? When he went to Boston. And so, I mean, I think on some level that's kind of what appeals to me. And when I think back, I still think back to, rooting for those players. And that's ultimately what I connect with. And it's funny, it's kind of a reason why I never really amassed a very big De'Aaron Fox collection is because there was always something to me that I was hard for to root for, like whether it was how nonchalant he was or how kind of like laid back he was. It almost seemed to manifest itself as not caring about winning or caring about putting an effort on the court. And so, I mean, obviously it's a big generalization. I'm not saying that's how he necessarily feels, but there was always something about him that didn't quite connect or resonate with me. And so,
Same.
even then, I do same.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know what it is.
He always said the right things.
Yeah,
I don't even know if it was his fault but maybe the kind of his game he wasn't making others better necessarily.
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, he's just not that good, I guess. Like,
Right. Yeah,
He's
and I
very
almost feel
good, but yeah.
yeah, and I almost feel like, people were talking about how the Kings got fleeced in that trade, and I'm like, I mean, are Fox and Levine really that different in terms of how good they are? I mean, they're different players, but I don't think they're really that different in terms of how good they are. I definitely wish we could have maybe gotten like a young player or a better draft pick in return. But yeah, I agree. I think Fox as a whole is a little overrated, but um, yeah, I mean, ultimately, I have a much bigger Tyrese Halliburton collection than I did do to De'Aaron Fox collection, even though he was only on the team for 1.5 years, right? And it's just because that I connected with him. Like, I think I posted this when Halliburton was traded, and it's like we could win this year's NBA championship, and I'll still be sad that Tyrese Halliburton is not a Sacramento King.
So yeah, I mean, I feel like I've been just because of the media pushback and it's I'm a little over it now, I think, but just that trade with Sabonis, we just got hammered for it, of course,
Yeah,
because we're the Kings, I feel like. But in truth, it was just a win-win for both teams. And so I'm he's playing very well again in the last couple weeks or month, I guess, and I find myself now that there's enough distance from that initial, you know, onslaught of the stupid Kings that I can feel happy again for him or something. But I was a little more like almost rooting for him not to do well, which is petty.
yeah. I mean, it's hard to, I think it's natural. I mean,
Yeah.
I think like if he wasn't my favorite player in the league, I mean, at the time, it's hard now to say that he is not being on the Kings. Actually, Sabonis is probably my favorite player in the league. Like, I just love his approach to the game, how hard he and how like durable he is, how hard he works. As I say that after he's like now out for at least a week with a hamstring strain, but yeah, I just love his energy. I love his attitude. Yeah, so it's an interesting kind of scenario that they swapped and kind of their statuses in my mind swapped too. But um,
Yeah, and he replaced for you like me, Fox. I mean, it is his attitude, his hardworking, the guy is banging and trying every play. And it's just, I mean, that's all you can ask for, right? I mean, he has
yeah,
limitations, I know, but yeah.
yeah, brings it every night. Very underrated too, and I kind of feel like, I mean, that's a good comparison you make. He's kind of the polar opposite to Fox in terms of his approach and kind of the vibe he gives off as a teammate and as a player. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I'm glad he's kind of injured, to be honest. I just feel like he needs a break.
Yeah.
He just doesn't miss games and he just bangs every day. And so, if we can kind of hang around and get into the playoffs and he's healthy by then and kind of takes even, 2 or 3 weeks off, I'd be kind of happy about that.
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely want him to make sure that he's back, hopefully, to kind of secure an all NBA spot. I think he was on that path. I hope
Huh.
he doesn't miss too much time, that he doesn't get recognized in that way.
Well, I like that you and I obviously think similarly. I didn't expect to talk about Sabonis as much as we are. That's great. I mean, I guess for those of you out there, these Kings fans like talking about the team, but um, yeah, this is the
I know.
real
I'm
this is the
sorry that
real
we have to
you.
put anyone through
Yeah,
that.
sorry about that. So you're kind of in the hobby, doing these side PCs, still doing King stuff. Any other areas you're exploring? I mean, you talked about vintage baseball. Where are you with that, in terms
Yeah,
of
I mean,
collecting?
I watch a lot of vintage baseball YouTube just because the community there is so strong and so large. And again, it's to me the absolute pinnacle of card nerding that's available at the moment, and at least a community form. And I've definitely thought about picking up some vintage baseball here and there. The problem is that it's just so hard for me to do it because I don't connect with it. Like, to me, my knowledge of baseball didn't exist before those mid 90s Indians teams. And so when even Indians players, like, I'm familiar with some of those older Indians players like Larry Doby and Bob Feller and things like that, but it's just not like I haven't been able to pull the trigger, and I don't think I really ever will, but I still enjoy hearing them talk about cards for sure.
No, see, that's interesting because I think about getting an Oscar Robertson, for instance, rookie card. I just feel like I should because he's the greatest king of all time. And I like older cards. But they're you know they're there. You can get one whenever you want. It's just a question of spending the money for it, right? And so, but what you said is, I mean, I don't really have a connection to it, and so that's helpful for me to think about, at least hearing your perspective with vintage baseball. Um, I wonder. I mean, in soccer, there's a very good Discord that's extremely active, and people are clearly passionate about and this going back into the 50s, even kind of older soccer players, right, in Europe. And so baseball has this, soccer is kind of growing this. I mean, it's very very much a new segment of the sports card hobby. Um, had basketball must have it somewhere for vintage. I know a collector who loves vintage, but I feel like he's kind of rare. Have you haven't discovered kind of any other? I mean, blowout forums, I guess, used to more, or is it dying, or is it interest in vintage basketball?
Well, vintage basketball, I mean, like you, I've come across collectors who collect vintage or put together vintage sets or whatnot. But I think, as you mentioned earlier, that vintage, that history of basketball cards just isn't quite there. So I don't know if that contributes to it. But um, yeah, Blowout, I think is it's really active. I think it's outside of Instagram the most active place. And obviously Instagram has its limitations when it comes to anything beyond short comments and liking, a post. Blowout is, I think, definitely the best place where you can give kind of have actual conversations about basketball cards. For me, Blowout, I think, has just shifted a little bit more to talking about the NBA. It's kind of a little more like league talk and which team is the pros and cons of each team and like which players are going to become good and stuff like that. So it's a little bit of like prospecting on younger players and talking about significant which cards will be significant, and so it's a little more market and league heavy than at least personally appeals to me. I mean, I've just started trying to be more active there just because, again, it's kind of one of those things where, well, if you want it to be a little bit more card heavy, then you need to infuse that in there. And I don't know if you're familiar with the hobby boards, which is a forum that was created by Mind Cycle Cards, Ryan, a couple years ago, and that one's definitely a lot more heavily card focused, but the activity just obviously isn't there the way it is on Blowout. It doesn't have the kind of collector or user base that Blowout does, and even of course Instagram. And of course, Instagram is just so much more user friendly. You can pull it out on your phone really quickly, scroll through a couple posts or stories, communicate easily, double tap to like. So it takes a long time to read conversations on a forum and respond. So it's tough these days.
Yeah, I mean, you're speaking to just, I mean, I think, like almost decades long developments of technology and reading habits. And, it's just hard to get on a website and type a lot. Now people just leave voice messages. I mean, I'm guilty as well. So, there's like a technology gap there or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh, yeah, it's interesting. We'll see how that evolves, I guess.
Yeah, we'll see. And I have a little bit of hope that maybe the YouTube avenue might be something that could be successful for basketball cards because I think it's a little bit of a combination of the two because the conversations do happen to be more obviously video than text. But, I again watched a vintage baseball trade night where across 2 or 3 hours there were 30 or 40 collectors with YouTube channels or YouTube accounts that jumped on to, I guess, a Zoom call and they put up, cards that they had available for trade and they made some deals. And it's again, that I think is a little bit more more aligned to the current kind of technological age.
Interesting. So yeah, I mean, it's possible then,
Yeah,
but kind of getting there is the challenge, I guess.
I think you're right.
No, it's I personally am just podcasts. I mean, because you get that long form. I mean, if I have time on the phone and can watch a YouTube video, I will. But
Mhm.
yeah, the podcast form is my favorite. And I've learned so much from that and gotten exposed to others. So I'm thankful for that. Anything else you want to share with us today? We I don't want to go too long. It's late at night for you, and you got
Yeah.
little ones at home. I know you got to attend to in the morning.
Hey, this is my card time.
Good, good.
Yeah, not in particular. I mean, I mean, more than anything, I'm trying to engage with my cards in ways that allow me to not have to buy new cards. That's one thing. And so whether that's taking pictures of them, whether that's sharing my collection like on Blowout and the hobby boards. And I just started a little bit on Instagram and YouTube, like all those avenues, I guess. I've just been sharing like my PC of each Kings player since I started following the team. And so like I've gone through Jason Williams and Chris Webber and Vlade Divac and stuff like that. And so I'm like only 5 or 6 players in right now, but I just kind of try to throw it on wherever I can. And again, for me, I think of it as kind of a journaling sort of diary exercise where if you're doing a journal, I mean, if you're writing a journal, that's 100% for you. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do it as. And it's my hope that at some point there's a place that basketball card collectors could go to talk about the intricacies of basketball cards, whether that's on a forum or on YouTube or on Reddit or whatever. And that's what I hope eventually is available. And again, like I said, I feel like the only way to do that is to kind of try to set the tone and do that myself. And I've actually noticed a lot more people, or maybe it's just because I'm more attuned to it now, but I've noticed a lot of like new basketball card channels on YouTube that I've seen. Yeah, and like whatever, only 3 or 5 or 10 subscribers, but it doesn't really matter. Like I watched the other day 15-minute Detroit Pistons PC pickup from a collector with 3 subscribers, and that was awesome. And we had a little conversation on his video, and it's just I think as great as Instagram is, it's just by nature a little more superficial, and hopefully, like I hope that the basketball card community can get to the point where we're having like long conversations via text or video about like Top's finest through the years or something, something random like that. I would love that.
The Pistons channel, what is it? Do you know the
If
name
I
of?
recall correctly, it was on YouTube Motor City Cardboard. I think that's what it was called. Um, he's Horn SO on the hobby boards. I don't remember the Instagram handle, but yeah, I mean like that was really cool, really fun to watch. And I hope that, there's a couple big basketball card channels on YouTube, like Wax Museum Podcast, Big J Basketball, 90s B-ball cards, things like that. And I'm hoping that like if there's a bunch more, maybe that there could be like a community that can thrive.
Good. Yeah, I mean, I wanted you to shout out the names. So, yeah, just to
Yeah, you
share.
got it.
Now I can also check them out.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
well, yeah, I mean, I tribute to you. I mean, I mean, uh, it's impressive. I mean, I wouldn't have you here today unless you had reached out and started this group. I mean, I was like, yes, definitely. So I think there are a lot of people like me out there who want to be part of these communities more. So kudos again to you for taking the initiative and hey, want to hang out and talk cards? I mean, it's kind of that simple, right?
Yeah, I totally agree, and I appreciate that. I hope that we can. It's like the seeds, planting seeds that will grow.
Awesome, awesome. Well, let's have a fun playoff run. At least let's make the playoffs. I feel good about
Yeah,
that at this point.
you know
But
what? That's all I want. I just want a first round series.
that's it. That's all we want.
Yeah,
No, no
I know.
title, none of that. Yeah.
Yeah, we're a very desperate fan base.
Easy to please, man. Just throw us some
Yeah,
scraps.
yeah.
All right, Joey. Well, thanks so much for giving your time and coming on. I certainly enjoyed it, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, and thank you again for having me on. Talk cards
Good.
anytime.